Today I want to talk about what I see as the top 3 reasons why doctors have really a problem with reimbursement. And when I say a problem with reimbursement, nobody has a problem with reimbursement. Everybody goes, hey, if I billed $10,000 and I got paid $10,000, I don't have a problem with reimbursement. If I bill $100 for a service and basically they pay me $100 for a service, I don't actually have any, I don't have any problem with reimbursement. But where you do have a problem, so when I go in and I look and I do a lot of consulting, when I look at offices that have reimbursement issues, it's always a imaging and documentation issue. So you have to remember that all of your care is dependent upon the severity of the condition that you're treating. So if a person has a scratch, they're not going to get 55 stitches. Right? It doesn't justify that. So if somebody put in 55 stitches, that's okay, it's excessive, but it's not going to get paid for because the injury does not dictate the amount of care that you're delivering. Now, in the spine is very easy. It only has 3 ways that it can be damaged. You either fracture it, which most of the doctors that are listening to this today are not dealing with fractures. Or if you're dealing with fractures, you're dealing with them after they've healed and they're stable. And now you're going to do the rehab effect on the fracture to help the person get out of the other conditions that they may have as associated with the fracture, such as chronic pain. Now, so you have fracture, you have excessive motion due to the non-disc ligament injury, and you have the disc injury, right? Or you have combinations thereof. But if you don't have an image, so many doctors today will go, oh, my attorney doesn't want me to do an excessive motion study. The only reason why an attorney wouldn't want you to do an excessive motion study is they don't understand it, and the doctors that basically allow the attorney not to understand it, in my world, don't understand it either. Because you can't determine how badly damaged a spinal injury patient is without an excessive motion test. It's impossible. It's not currently possible. So all you're doing is under-documenting. And when somebody talks you into under-documenting, then you need to be okay with getting your bill reduced. That's all there is to it. Because your bill is going to get reduced, and rightfully so. It should be reduced. Because your documentation does not support the level of care that you are delivering. Let me give you an example. If you have a disc herniation, that's a disc herniation on MRI, and the only thing you have is that on MRI, you have a pre-existing condition. In the insurer's eyes, in my eyes, and in everybody's eyes, you have a pre-existing condition. What caused the disc herniation? Because if the disc herniation was caused by the auto accident itself, other tissue damage has to be there that's consistent with what would be left behind with that kind of mechanism. Remember, an auto injury is a compressive and shear force mechanism. It's going to shear ligaments. If it doesn't shear any ligaments, but it just hits the disc, that's impossible. It's not just going to hit the disc. So if all you have is disc, it's considered to be a pre-existing condition. If you have the other ligament damage around the disc, then it can be considered to be part of the accident. If there's other clinical factors involved, that you have to clinically correlate the other factors that you're getting, the history, what you're picking up in exam with imaging, but it's not hard. So, the biggest thing is the imaging and your documentation. So what I know from doctors that want to be, here's in my years of training doctors, here's one thing I know. There's a bell curve, right? There's a bell curve in every profession, right? You got the back side of the bell curve, those are the doctors that you want to avoid like the plague. They're not good, right? Then there's the middle of the bell curve. That's like the 50%. There's the middle of the bell curve, and they're average, right? And then there's the front of the bell curve. And that's where you get the best of the best. And when you get to the front of the bell curve, that's where the best of the best lie in every profession, whether you're an engineer, whether you're a musician, whether you're a performer, whether you're a football player, a baseball player, it doesn't matter, right? So you always want to strive to get better. Now here's what I've found about the people that get better. The people at the back end, they're the complainers. They complain about everything. They complain about their profession, they complain about their technique, they complain about everything. In the middle, they self-invalidate. That their worth in the market is not fully understood to them. So they self-invalidate. Now the beautiful thing about the people that are in the front of the bell curve is the complaints and the self-invalidation take all of those people, 75% of the people, out of the market. If I'm at the front of the bell curve, I don't have to compete with them anymore. They self-take themselves out, right? At the front of that bell curve, that's where you find the doctors that train. That's where you find the doctors that continue to educate themselves. And that's what you need to do in today's markets, because markets do change. But the biggest thing you have to understand is your role of imaging in the spinal injury market. Because the people who are at the front of the bell curve are not getting the same complaints, and they're not actually listening. So if an attorney says, well, why would you do this test? They're actually just saying, well, how else do I determine how badly damaged the spine is? I can't determine how badly damaged the spine is without this test. I can't determine if I have a disc injury with this, and if the disc injury is consistent with a new injury. I can't determine the grade of the sprain without it. I can't determine if I've got a surgical level without it. I can't determine if I've got athletic activity restrictions. I can't properly place it in my treatment guidelines. I can't basically determine if there's a permanent injury and what's the impairment level. I can't determine on a more probable than not basis if there's a higher probability for a disc herniation. I can't determine where my facet injuries are without it. I cannot determine if I've got an upper cervical ligament injury and the severity of it without it. And that ties right into any kind of traumatic brain injury and my understanding and treatment of, and what my role is involved with that. I can't determine any of that. That's what the people at the front of the bell curve talk about to the attorneys. Now, the people in the middle don't even understand what I'm saying. Or if you are in the middle and you're understanding it, but you don't know how to use it, you've got to get to the front. You got to get to the front. Because today's market and the future market is going to be a market of results, not of physical, not of money results. Money results come with poor results, right? The higher the settlements, usually the poorer the shape the patient's in. The better the shape the patient's in, the less future need that they have. And for good doctors, that's what your job is. That's what your role is. So on documentation and on reimbursement, you have to know your imaging, and your documentation has to improve. As I said, when I go into offices and I look and I say, oh, they got a documentation issue, or they got a reimbursement issue, they're taking 50% reductions on every single case, I already know what I'm looking at. I already know what I'm looking at. And you should too. So the key things that you want to do is know your imaging, use the imaging, and make sure your documentation is good. And your reimbursement issues will resolve.